Morning, everyone. It's probably not quite 7 a.m. yet, but I'm up and decided I would film a new video for you. Today I'm going to talk about the wars in Yugoslavia and what led up to the 1995 Scott O'Grady incident, where a US F-16 pilot, Scott O'Grady, was shot down over Bosnia, which would later inspire the Owen Wilson film Behind Enemy Lines. I want to talk about this topic just because it's a complex topic. I mean, I can't cover all of the details in a span of a video here. Hopefully you'll do some research, but anytime where people have been persecuted and there's been mass genocide or ethnic cleansing, I feel those things need to be remembered and not forgotten. So hopefully we can keep them from happening again. So Yugoslavia was a communist country, modeled after the Soviet system, but separate from the Soviet bloc. The government had kind of snubbed Stalin, didn't really want to be part of the Soviet Union, because the six republics that made up Yugoslavia had really been pawed over for centuries by other nations, whether it was the Ottoman Empire or the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and they just were tired of foreign influence. So even though they modeled themselves after the Soviet system, they didn't want to be, reporting to Moscow. But within the country itself, there was, a lot of different cultural differences and grudges that have been held for going back centuries. And in 1991, about the same time the Soviet Union started to break up, the small republics within Yugoslavia started to vie for their own independence, such as Croatia, Albania, Bosnia, so forth. Serbian majority within Bosnia wanted to create a greater Serbia, and this led to a war within the country where a lot of what would later be considered war crimes were happening by Serb, national forces, as well as militant forces, not part of the actual Yugoslav military. And NATO was called to get involved. The U.S. and NATO were initially hesitant to get involved because of how complex of an environment Yugoslavia was. It was hard to tell who was really the good guys in this conflict. But eventually in 1994, we intervened, and the U.S. was flying flights over Bosnia, a no-fly zone, to keep Serbian aircraft from being used against civilians, and that's what led to the Scott O'Grady incident. So Scott O'Grady was part of the he was flying out of Italy in the 555th Fighter Squadron out of Aviano Air Base, Italy, and he was just on a routine no-fly zone patrol when a Serbian surface air missile battery engaged him and his wingman, and he was shot down. They were able to, the anti-aircraft battery operators were pretty smart. They knew if they just painted his aircraft, he would have, probably sufficient warning to evade and move back out to sea and avoid being shot down, but they were out to take down a U.S. pilot. So they would just intermittently turn on their radar guidance, and so it would pop up a warning, but it would immediately go back off on the F-16. So they, weren't really sure exactly what was going on, if it was just a malfunction or, they were just picking up intermittent signals. They asked Command and Control AWACS aircraft to scan for any SAM batteries active, but because they weren't actively pinging the two F-16s, the AWACS weren't able to pick up anything. So what they ended up doing is they fired their missiles at the two F-16s and then turned their radar on just at the last minute, which allowed the two SAM missiles to get a general lock, and it was basically too late for them to do any evasive maneuvers or deploy any chaff or anything like that at that point. So Grady's F-16's hit, and he breaks in two pieces, and he ejects over Bosnia, and is stuck behind enemy lines for 6 days, where he basically survived on what he had in his survival kit and eating bugs, grass, and until he can be rescued by Marines who flew in on helicopters offshore. So if you've ever seen the movie with Owen Wilson, Behind Enemy Lines, it kind of follows this basic story. It's not an exact telling. Scott O'Grady initially gave the movie a positive review, but he actually later sued the producers of the film because they portrayed it as a true telling, and he didn't really care for how his character, so to speak, was portrayed by Owen Wilson. But the whole, him being shot down, having to survive behind enemy lines, being pursued by the Yugoslav army, but as well as the rebels. In the movie, they talk about how if they kill Owen Wilson, they'll blame it on militant forces outside of Yugoslavian control. That actually is somewhat true. In the main Serb forces were called off so that if something did happen, they could just, have plausible deniability and blame it on forces outside of their control. In the movie, Owen Wilson, he climbs up, like a mountain to use his radio to try to get a signal out. Scott O'Grady did do that. He spent several days trying to get up to a hilltop where he could try to get a signal out to be picked up. And he was then picked up by Marines, just like Owen Wilson was in the movie. However, they didn't come under fire at the time of the landing. They were like right on Scott O'Grady, but they held their fire until the helicopters were in the air, and they took quite a bit of fire on the way out. But everyone made it out safely. In fact, apparently one Marine was struck by a bullet that went through the helicopter, but it somehow stopped in his canteen. Must have just had barely enough velocity left. So, I like that movie. I think I'm glad they made that movie because it talks about kind of what went on in Bosnia, and it shows some of the ethnic cleansing type of the stuff that went on there, the mass graves and such. I think it's important that we remember that type of thing. When I was in the Army, my platoon sergeant in medic school had served as a peacekeeper in Bosnia, in the U.S. Army, and he said some of the things he saw still haunted him to this day, so it tells you a little bit about what went on there. In the background, I have some artifacts here. Actually, I have a Yugoslavian helmet. This AK-47 is actually Yugoslavian made, so it's just like the one that would have been used by all sides in the conflict. I do have a pilot survival kit. You can check this out in one of my other videos where I open it up. There's just a survival guide. All U.S. Air Force crews would have been given that when they were in their SEER survival school. Here's a pilot's flask that would go in their survival vest. And then I know a lot of you come here for the rations, so I don't have unfortunately I don't have a food packet survival general purpose, which is what would be in like the pilot's survival vest, but inside those food packet survival general purposes are the cookie and oatmeal compressed bars. So I've had these hanging out. These are out of a cold weather ration, but I figure we'll check these out too while I'm at it. Pilots can't carry like a great deal of survival food or water inside their survival vest. There's some, but they're trained to eat whatever they can find, and that's what Scott O'Grady did. He ate leaves, grass, and ants. There's a documentary out there called Situation Critical about his time down behind enemy lines, and he talks about that stuff in his interviews if you want to check it out. He also wrote a book on the whole incident as well. But These things usually hold up. I think these are from the 80s. So let's see, let's check them out. Oh, well, that one was already kind of like opened. Interesting. Now, obviously, if you're down behind enemy lines, you would just be eating this as you went. But in other rations, you can like kind of reconstitute them into a cereal. So here's the inside. I'm going to taste it. That one I don't think is because that seal broke. Oh no, I guess they're both like that. They're not actually sealed, there's just like a protective coating. Yeah, it kind of has a weird bleachy taste. I don't think that one's good anymore. That's unfortunate. But that might be the... there's a granola bar and the oatmeal cookie bar. As Steve tells you, never like eat the whole thing at once. Yeah. There's something a little off about that. Pardon me. Yeah, I'm not going to eat the rest of that. That's unfortunate, because those things usually hold up, and they're usually pretty good. I'll wash that down with some coffee. Something in that, pardon me, just didn't hold up. Which is, like I said, unusual. It gets a weird chemical taste. Yeah, that's unfortunate. These things are usually supposed to be pretty good. I was kind of looking forward to it. Let's try the other part. Now this one still smells pretty good. Still kind of feeling it out after the last one, but so far this one seems to be better. I think Steve had the same problem on one, where one was kind of good and the other one wasn't. This one, it just had a weird pool water. I got the sensation in my nose now. It's like pool water went up your nose. There's something off about it. But so hopefully you enjoyed this video. Maybe look more into the Scott O'Grady incident if you want more into our involvement in Bosnia. We would later resume air combat against Slobodan Milosevic in 1999 after he was after engaging Kosovo forces. He was trying to instill his influence in Kosovo. That's a whole other complex part of the conflict. But later on, Milosevic and other leaders would eventually be charged with war crimes for what they did in Yugoslavia. So, justice eventually caught up with them. But, yeah. So, and as far as the rations, if you come across these cookie bars, I guess proceed with caution. They're supposed to really last, but maybe, I don't know, maybe there was a pinhole in that packaging. It didn't really hiss. So that could have been part of it. There wasn't a hiss when I opened it. If they stay sealed, they're supposed to be good. And I think this one's okay. This one, that's a no-go. All right, everybody. Well, thanks for watching again, and I'll be back soon with some other stuff.